To talk more about what the 2014 legislative session meant for education policy. We have New York State School Boards Association's Tim Kremer. With him is Mike Borges of the New York State Association of School Business Officials. Then joining us from New York City is Billy Easton of the Alliance for Quality Education. Thank you all of you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, we start with you, Mr. Kremer, on graduation rates. A slight improvement, obviously you always want to see the numbers go up rather than down, but the achievement gap is pretty considerable, particularly when you look at high needs school districts versus high income school districts, and also minority districts, minority kids versus white kids, for lack of a better term. So you have a problem there.
We have seen this same pattern for a long time. Indeed, it's only incremental from last year as far as the graduation rate, but I'm looking back here for a little ways back, and we see that 2001, the graduation rate was only 65%, which means about 20,000 more students are graduating in June of 2013 than graduated in June of 2005. So that's a good thing. We've made progress every year, and we're moving in the right direction. But as you point out, when you start looking at high need versus low need, you start looking at racial, you start looking at English language learners, big gaps between Caucasian, white students, black students, or African American, Hispanic students, big differences.
I'm just going to put this, to you, Mike, but if it's not in your wheelhouse, we'll go back to Tim. But again, we see from the Big Fives, Rochester going in the wrong direction. Now, it was 43% compared to in 09 for the 09 cohort, compared to 43.4% for the 08 cohort. So it's not a massive slip, but you're also talking about a city that had the lowest test results in the state. So what's going on with Rochester? Is there some problem specifically with Rochester?
I'm not generally familiar with the circumstances of Rochester, but to echo Tim's comments, I think we are headed in the right direction. There are also some bright lights on the horizon in terms of 94% of kids outside of the Big Five are doing well and graduating. And so I just think that, again, we need to just make sure that teachers are equipped, professional development, that the schools have the right resources. And we need to look at what the input is and what our output is. And we're going to look at a study called an educational opportunity study that shows that whether, a low need school district and high need school districts have the same sort of resources and have the same sort of output. And there's a big difference between, as you can see from the report, that certain, it's just obviously Rochester or Syracuse, where there are high needs, are not doing as well as as a low need school district. So what's the difference there beyond the resources? What are other components? What other factors are going into this that that result in these kinds of graduation rates?
Billy, thoughts on the graduation rates?
One thing that's interesting is to compare what's happening in New York versus what's happening in New Jersey. And when we make that comparison, what we see is that in New Jersey, unlike New York, New Jersey places an emphasis on funding high-need school districts at a much higher level than wealthier school districts. And the results show where their achievement gap is very narrow. Students from living in poverty, African American and Latino students and English language learners in New Jersey far outperform their counterparts in New York, and a lot has to do with the fact that those needy districts have the resources they need.
Okay, but it's interesting because Mike starts to sort of suggest something that I think if you talked to people who study this kind of phenomenon would tell you it's not all about education, obviously. It also has to do with high poverty rates, it has to do with high crimes, it has to do with what's going on with families. The school can't be the solve-all system for all of these societal problems.
I think one of the key...
the school can't be the...
Go ahead, Billy.
Go ahead. Okay, the school can't solve all the problems, but the school, if the school is equipped with enough social workers and guidance counselors, and as well as high quality curriculum and student supports, it can help a tremendous amount and make a big difference.
I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think to echo Billy in the sense too is that there's one thing you can't quantify sometimes, you can't pay for, and that's parental involvement.
Right.
I think every study you see out there, every report, always comes back to how involved parents are into a child's education. So I think that is key, and anything we can do to incentivize or encourage parental involvement will pay dividends in the long term.
Well, but you also have a situation, I mean, and school boards obviously have a role to play in that because you have a lot of parents who get elected to school boards. But you also have a situation where not only parental involvement, but early intervention, in other words, getting kids started at pre-K, was something that a lot of educators and experts say is key, particularly New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, of course, to bridge that income inequality gap, Billy, that you've been speaking of too. But when we see the numbers, not that many upstate school districts are actually availing themselves of the money, which was considerably less than was offered to New York City. So is that a problem that you, Tim, see going forward?
I don't see it a problem yet. There's $40 million that's been made available to districts outside of New York City. I'm understanding that 123 school districts
Right.
have expressed an interest, haven't necessarily made application for, but have expressed an interest in being eligible for that money. I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, we would like it to not be going through competitive grants. We'd like to have promise of sustainability. We'd like to have available, scaled up across the state. But honestly, there are probably 123 districts that we're ready to go there, because so many districts have said, how are we going to open up a UPK program, a universal pre-K program, when we're struggling with our K through 12
If they
program?
have a K program.
Well, let's assume they do.
Yeah.
If 123 say, give us the money, we're going to put together a high-quality universal pre-K program. We're going to show you how it can be done and what impact it will have on these children's lives, and it really works well, I think everybody will be lined up for it. And then I hope the governor comes forward on his promise and said, when you're ready, we're ready.
Right. And Michael, so then generally speaking, do you think that this legislative session was a success from the education standpoint? I mean, we addressed a lot of issues.
Mm-hmm.
They did get just at the end there, the teacher evaluation changes. It's not a moratorium, right? It's a pause for 2 years. We don't want to scare anybody
Reset
there.
button, yeah.
Right. I mean, so the question is, did they go as far as they needed to go? Billy, I know you're gearing up, so just hold on one second.
In terms of state support for schools, I think, again, we came a long way. It was a $1.1 billion increase, a 5.4% increase in school aid, and $602 million in restoration of GEA. So that was a positive thing. I think it's more important to say what they didn't do,
Yeah.
which was good, because they didn't do the education investment tax credit, which was giving money away to private schools. They didn't do special education giveaways, to certain segments of the society. So I think it's good in the sense of what they didn't do. And also there was no significant mandates imposed upon us. There were some mandate relief proposals. There was like 4 of our legislative proposals had to do with mandate relief or cost savings. The legislature passed all 4 of those proposals. So, I mean, they're taking baby steps in the right direction, but there's still a lot ways to go.
Billy, I know that you don't think that what happened in this session was significant or sufficient, although do you agree with Michael's assessment that there were some baby steps taken?
Well, I mean, I don't want to say it wasn't significant. I think, the fact that the legislature added $500 million to what the governor had proposed, the fact that, we see, districts like Schenectady, which would have been forced to eliminate kindergarten if the legislature hadn't added that money, and they were able to save kindergarten. That's very significant. It wasn't enough. I mean, it was important, very important, and it took a lot of work from a lot of people, folks on this interview and folks all over the state, to make that happen. But compared to what is needed to get schools, the majority of schools don't even have the resources from the state that they had in 2008. That's how far behind we are, much less the investment in progress. I did also, Liz, want to weigh in on the pre-K, because what we're finding from a lot of districts around the state is the reason that they didn't apply is the way the program is structured creates impediments for them to implement it, because they have to have the money in their either reserve funds or in their budgets now. They have to spend that money now
And then get reimbursed.
and get reimbursed later.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of districts who've told us they simply can't afford it. We have a successful universal pre-K program. It serves 42% of the students with half-day programs. To expand that to full day, we should follow the same model. The governor should provide the money up front and let the districts then provide pre-K, because 4-year-olds need it.
Okay, so we're not done talking about education. I mean, this is a perennial conversation. It's one of the biggest, most contentious conversations that we have about funding during budget time, and then subsequently about policy. So Common Core, I mean, and obviously we could do like a whole show on Common Core, but Tim, we're not done. And also in this pause that we've taken, there seems to be a disagreement as to what we're supposed to be doing during this time. I mean, if you talk to the Assembly Education Committee Chair Kathy Nolan, she says, well, this gives us the time, and if you talk to the union, to reassess the whole thing. The governor says, wait, whoa, no, we're not reassessing the standards. We're just, taking the time that we need to implement them right. So what's going to happen in this period?
I hope the governor's right, because I am scared that this is the beginning of an unraveling of education reforms that I believed in. I do not believe that what has happened with what was agreed upon this time along, around where we're going to say just those teachers who are developing or ineffective, and only those who teach in grades 3 through 8, English language arts and math, and had those ratings, they're the ones that are going to be, I'm not too worried about that. I think the pool of people who will be affected by this pause, this adjustment, this safety net, it's going to be relatively small. I don't think this has a huge impact. But I have heard that the president of NYSET, for example, has indicated that this is the beginning of a process to undo much of Common Core and APPR.
Okay, we're almost done, so I want to go around the table and get thoughts on this. Michael, thoughts on
Well, I
Common
think,
Core?
again, we all agree the rollout was poorly handled. I think, a pause, if it allows us to put Common Core back on track, is a good thing, and allay parents' and teachers' concerns about how it's implemented. It could be a positive step.
Billy?
Well, I think that it's, positive that there's a pause in use of these tests in the teacher evaluation, but what there's not is really any break for the students. There's no reduction in the quantity of time they're spending taking the test, and we need to assess to make sure that the standards are developmentally appropriate for all grade levels of students.
Well, I'm sure that this is hardly the end of it, because I know that there's a lot of consternation around the Common Core, of course, and it is an election year, so we'll be talking a lot more about it. Billy Easton from New York City, I thank you very much. With me in the studio, Tim Kremer, thank you. Michael Borges, thank you for your time.
Thank you.